Welcome to the podcast. Practice plan. Thank you to all the volunteer parents that invest time, effort, and energy. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not always a job that's well thanked and appreciated the way it should be. And without all of you, there would be no youth sports because all the little cities and townships, they can't afford to hire coaches. So they need parent coaches. And these parent coaches, all of you, they sacrifice time away from the rest of their family to be there to coach a group of kids, the majority of which aren't even their own. So it should be appreciated that they're sacrificing that time to be there, even if one of the kids is on the team, to be there, supporting the group, leading the group, investing time in the group. They have to leave work early. They have to fight traffic to get to the gym, losing weekends at games. It's a big sacrifice. So thank you to all of you from all of the kids and players that you're helping, because all the while you have to know you're going to be questioned by every other parent in the crowd when you accidentally forget to call a timeout, something silly like that. Some of the parents in the crowd, and I've been sitting up there in the bleachers, and I've heard some crazy stuff myself. They question everything anyways. It could be Phil Jackson pacing the sideline on a third grade game or something. It could be Phil Jackson, 11 NBA championships as a coach, 2 more as a player when he played for the Knicks back when they were actually good. Sorry, New York fans, but growing up in Los Angeles, I got to stick with the Lakers. So it could be Phil Jackson on the sideline. There's still going to be people mumbling, questioning, and thinking they know better. And that's just a part of sports, I guess. But it's still not fair to the parents that sacrifice their time to coach kids. As a side note, the football coach in Pittsburgh, he's never had a losing record. 17 seasons in the NFL, leading the Steelers. 17 seasons, and he's never had a losing record. And there's still people in the crowd that question him. So it's okay, I guess, and understandable, I guess, that if they can question him, they're going to question all of us. It's just a part of it. There's a relatively famous saying that not all great players make great coaches. And again, when you generalize, there's going to be some exceptions to that rule. There's some, for sure, former great players that are fantastic coaches. And there's some coaches that were probably terrible players, awful players, just weren't very talented or skilled and couldn't do things, but their brains are on a different level. So they've gone on to be amazing coaches. But there's a famous saying that not all great players make great coaches. And what does that mean? That means that it's perfectly okay not to have been a former college player in order to coach, in order to be qualified to coach a fourth grade girls team or a seventh grade boys team in your local community. That's okay. In fact, it's really hard sometimes for former players to have enough patience when working with young players to realize that they're still learning and simply not capable of doing whatever it is that the former player, now coach, wants and requires and is requesting them to do. Patience is hard to develop. And for anybody that's ever coached, you'll find that sometimes it's easier to have patience for other kids more so than you would have with your own. But overall, you need to have patience, and that's very difficult sometimes for a former player who was very gifted and had a lot of success. It's hard for them to have enough patience to work with kids. But the main thing is that whoever's coaching, you have to care about making kids better. You have to care about making sure it's a great environment for the entire team. That's by far the most important thing. It's okay if you don't know some of the X's and O's. You have to care about making it a great environment and a wonderful experience for all the kids involved. And once you're the coach, you have to ask yourself, which is more important? Everybody wants both of these, but which is more important if you could only choose one? Winning now or developing future players that keep coming back year after year? If you could only pick one, which one's more important? If you spend a little bit of time thinking about it, obviously number 2 is the better choice, but some people they're short-sighted and they think more in the short term, so they want to win now at all costs. It's important that you develop a love and a passion in the game among the players that you're working with. Because if it's a win at all costs now situation, a lot of those fourth grade girls, they won't play that much because you're going to play the best ones. So there's going to be girls that are 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th on the team, and they're rarely going to play. So that means they're not going to develop experience. And when they get in there, they're going to be terrified of making mistakes. So they're going to be afraid of the moment. They're not going to gain experience. And because they don't gain experience, they're not going to gain confidence. So they're not going to be future players. It's important that you can kind of step away from feeling that winning or losing's a reflection of your own abilities and make sure it's about the kids. On the other hand, if you choose the correct option, and we'll say second option, but in my opinion, the correct option, if you choose that option and you want to develop future talent, so the high school team eventually has enough players someday to have a JV and a varsity team. It's sad that some programs, they've done a bad job on the youth levels. Their youth program hasn't flourished because they've been so short-sighted and focused only on winning that the numbers dwindle and kids find themselves being attracted to other sports that are potentially more fun, or their friends are having more fun. So it entices them to go, and there's less stress and less pressure, and they have more fun there. So basketball, there's a lot of moving pieces. You want to make sure that it's fun for them because short term, you're going to take some losses by developing talent. But long term, there's going to be some huge wins for the community. So I actually prefer and suggest that you're chasing developing rather than chasing winning. But every community is different. So you have to figure that one out on your own and kind of see and get a feel for the pulse of the leadership in your community. Because for some youth coaches, it's going to sound funny, but for some youth coaches, the season is their NBA championship and they're chasing their own glory. And that's not right, but we all know that one coach. We've played against that coach who takes it crazy seriously, way more than it needs to be. So let's assume that you're in it for the right reasons and you want to help the team. You want to help the team have a fun, enriching experience. What should you work on in practice? That's a question we get asked a lot. We work with a lot of players through the course of the academy and private training and AAU and skills clinics. We work with a lot of players. So we deal with a lot of parents. And that's one of the biggest questions from parents. What should they work on in practice? And this episode isn't dedicated specifically to the seasoned coach who's been coaching youth basketball for the past 20, 30 years. It's not necessarily for them. For sure, there's going to be some nuggets of wisdom that can help them too, but it's not necessarily dedicated just to them. But it's also not dedicated just to the coach who, until last week, when they were pressured at the meeting or by the group of parents in charge, when they were pressured because they couldn't find somebody to do it, that they kind of got thrust in this situation, is not necessarily for that person either, who maybe doesn't know a whole lot about basketball. It's for everybody in between. So there's something there for everybody, but we're going to assume that you know a little bit about basketball. You've been around the game a little bit. Maybe you don't know everything, but you definitely know something. So that big gray area, this podcast, it's dedicated to you in between those two very drastic far ends of the spectrum. A very good friend of mine recently reached out, and similar to what I just said, he kind of got thrust into the role of being the fifth grade girls coach for his local school team. Why? Because Phil Jackson wasn't available, right? So nobody else was able to rise to the occasion. They couldn't find somebody that was able to do it. The hours are sometimes challenging. People work, they have jobs. Sometimes practices are right after school. So it's hard to find the right human to do it. They found him. He rose to the occasion. He volunteered. So he's doing it. But he doesn't really know a whole lot about basketball. And I say he doesn't know a whole lot about basketball. He's never coached basketball before in his life and is not a former professional player, did not play in college, did not play in high school. Loves the game. More importantly, loves his granddaughter. So there's passion. He wants to help. He wants it to be a good environment. He wants all the girls to have a great experience. So what did he do? On his own, before he ever asked me, what did he do? He went on Google, found a book called Basketball for Dummies. And for all our European listeners that maybe don't know, there's a series of books in America called Fill in the Blank Subject for Dummies. And it basically walks you through and explains a topic as if you've never done it before. So Basketball for Dummies is a book that he bought, started reading through it, started learning how many players are on the floor at any given time, what are some of the referee signals, how long is the game, all the little details that sometimes we take for granted. So he educated himself, which is great. It's beautiful. It's the way you should kind of pragmatically go through it with an engineering type mind to educate yourself. But then he didn't really know what he should be working on in practice. So we met, we talked, we went through some details, and it's really helped him. And more importantly, it's really helped the group. So we want to help players, but we want to help coaches help those players as well. So back to the question, what should you work on in practice? How much skill work? This is a necessary part of the equation, especially for those that live in cold weather places because it's cold outside and it's dark. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult to go outside and just kind of work on your form or work on your shot in those winter months. When you come home from school, you got your homework, and then pretty soon it's dark, it's cold, it's snowing, or it's slippery outside. You got to put on a pair of gloves. It's possible, but it's not the same for the people that live in California or Florida or Texas or a bunch of other places that are warm where you can just kind of go outside and get shots up all the time. So in cold weather places, especially, you need to make sure that they're doing skill work in the gym during your practices because otherwise they just might not get enough of it. So if you want them to be better shooters, for example, you have to work on shooting at practice. If you want them to be better at ball handling, could they go in the basement? Could they go in the garage and work on it on their own? Yeah, they could, and they should. But it's better sometimes to get enough of that in practice so that everything after that is extra. You don't want to assume that they're doing that at home because some kids won't. How much time should you invest in running plays? Do you want them to be robots and just kind of be assigned positions and run to spots on the floor? Or do you want to let them just figure it out and play completely carefree, which obviously can lead to pure chaos? Sometimes youth basketball looks like a pack of dogs just chasing the tennis ball. If you put 20 dogs in a field and you hold a tennis ball in your hand, you chuck that tennis ball as far as you can, they're all going to chase after it. And sometimes youth basketball kind of looks like that where everybody's chasing the ball. So you need some type of structure to make sure that they understand the different places on the court. Where are the corners? Where are the wings? Where are the blocks? These are called the elbows. This is the top, to make sure that they're not all just crowded and chasing the ball. So you need a healthy balance between the two in terms of structure and freedom. You need a balance between those two things. So perhaps you can make a simple rule. And this is, again, very, very fundamental on the ground level. You can make a simple rule for them. If you play great defense and you keep the other team from scoring, so you force a turnover, you force them to miss a shot, you guys get the rebound, you can run like the wind blows. Go run a fast break, go 3-on-2, go 2-on-1, go down there, have fun, get a good shot. But if you get scored on, we want to bring it down and run a play. So all 5 players are involved. We have a good action. We have some structure and we know what we're doing. We don't want the game just to be chaos. Defense. You have to work on defense, right? Sometimes people forget that, but defense is super important. If you can keep the other team from getting easy shots, you'll always put yourself in a situation to have a chance to win. So defense is very important. You have to work on defense, individual defense and team defense. And that includes closeouts, making sure they know how to slide their feet, making sure they understand double teams and trapping. But start with getting them to talk and bend their knees. If you can do those 2 things, make sure your players talk, make sure they bend their knees, you're already on the right track. There's college teams that are still working on those 2 components. Then you're going to need some type of blobs and slobs. Blob, B-L-O-B, baseline out of bounds, slobs, S-L-O-B, sideline out of bounds. You're going to need some type of blobs and slobs. What are they? How many do you need? I would suggest a maximum of 2 each, depending on the grade level. You can do a lot more. You can have some trick plays. You can have some basic alignments with several options. But if you overdo it at the youth stages and you have, let's say, 10 different options from the baseline, 1, they're going to forget them. 2, you're going to get angry when they forget them. 3, it's going to be so chaotic and mismatched because it just takes one person to do it wrong or to have bad timing on a screen for it not to work. So you're better off working on 1 or 2, but working on 1 and getting it really sharp so they have it, so they know it, so there's structure. And then they can start to figure out the reads. Okay, if I screen and my player goes under, if I screen here and they switch, if I screen here and this happens, then I slip. Then they can start to figure that out just through trial and error. So what would a sample practice plan look like? Well, grab your pen and paper and let's get going. Or maybe you're like the waitress sometimes in restaurants. It just kind of memorizes everything for an entire table and they don't have to write anything down for that order. And then they just magically your stuff gets there and it's perfect. They knew every side dish. They knew every change. I don't know how they do it, but there's people out there like that. Maybe you're like them. Otherwise, if you're not driving, grab your pen and paper and let's get going. So let's say you have 90 minutes twice a week. Maybe you have more practices, maybe you have less, but just so we have a basic starting point. Let's say you have 90 minutes. This could be done for both practices, what we're going to talk about, or you can tweak the second one and make it a little bit more skill heavy or a little bit more team focused. That's up to you. But we're going to talk about a sample 90-minute practice. And remember, give water breaks between each segment or whenever necessary. In the old days, I've had some of these guys. In the old days, there was coaches who thought that water was for softies. And you can replace softy with whatever word that you think applies right there. But they thought that water was for softies. That is not the case. Humans need water. They need breaks. They need to get their heart rate back down. They need those little breaks, especially in between high exertion activities. So be smart. We're talking about kids. They need breaks. Give them those breaks. This should not feel like boot camp or the army or something like that. Make sure you're smart and give those kids water breaks, even if you're mad. So the first component, warm up. This should be 10 minutes of movement. Use the court. They're not sprinting. They're not stopping. It's not crazy hard. You don't want to go from 0 to 100. Hey guys, let's get going today. And then boom, they're sprinting full speed. That's how you get hurt. Kids are made out of rubber a little bit, right? They're not like adults where they need to stretch as long, but they still need to move and work their bodies into it, especially if they're coming in from the cold. So 10 minutes. This could be jogging the half court, skipping, sliding, high knees, butt kicks down and back, a wide variety of warm-up exercises that you would see in a lot of different sports, not just basketball, but you can use the court for them to do that. But there could be drills in this segment with the ball. So we talked about some without the ball, like jogging, skipping, sliding, high knees, all that. But you could also use this time to kind of sneak in some ball handling, some coordination aspects. So those drills that we talked about where they're skipping, high knees, butt kicks, they could also dribble during that time. If your kids are a little bit older, a little bit more coordinated, they could do ball handling while they're doing those exercises. So using the ball as much as possible, it kind of helps you as a coach kill two birds with one stone. So they're getting some good ball handling work in while they're getting warmed up. I also like variations of dribble tag. They love games like this in Europe because there's some thinking and there's some strategy involved. So little games where everybody has a ball, you use the full court, everybody has a ball, you pick two players, they have to dribble around, everybody's dribbling, there's no traveling, they have to dribble around, stay in bounds, and you're running around trying to tag players. Once you get tagged, you can have them go out. Once they get tagged, there's options. Once they get tagged, you can have them go out to the sideline, do a certain number of push-ups or stretch or whatever you want. Once they get tagged, maybe they have to immediately do 5 jumping jacks or tuck jumps or something like that, and then they can play again. You can change the taggers. So there's a bunch of different options. That's just one basic example. So I would suggest you YouTube that and check that out because it's a great way to force kids to kind of think, to kind of plan ahead, to get their feet moving. But also, it's fun. It's not a grueling drill. It's not like running a suicide, which is, just the name itself. You don't want them doing drills that they dread, that they don't look forward to. So it's kind of a fun game. Helps them get loose, helps them dribble, helps them run around, gets the heart beating. And then you can kind of go into the next segment. I would suggest going into skill work after that. 10 minutes. So we had our warm up for 10 minutes. Now we have our skill work for 10 minutes. Let's talk about shooting. So there's a million drills out there. It's amazing how much information is out there available on the web. So there's tons and tons of drills out there for shooting. You have to make sure that you find some that makes sense for your age group. You don't want to be doing professional level drills with second graders. And you also don't want to be doing drills that are meant for tiny little kids with players that are obviously much older and need to be challenged. So make sure you find drills that are appropriate for your age group and the number of the players on the team. Maybe you have 12, maybe you have 7. Make sure you have drills that fit. But the main thing is that they're getting up a lot of shots from the actual places that you would expect them to shoot from in games. So we'll say quote unquote game shots. You want them shooting game shots, not shots that look cool, not shots that they saw on Instagram or some highlight reel, shots that you think they'll get in a game. So if this player is probably not the best three-point shooter, maybe they're getting shots from the baseline. Maybe they're getting hook shots. Maybe they're getting jump shots from the elbow. Maybe they have to pump fake and take one dribble into the shot. So make sure they're getting game shots. And focus on their form more than anything else. Constantly remind them, start below your waist, shoot in one motion, perfect follow through, snap your wrist, have great backspin. Those instructions should come out of your mouth repeatedly just so they get used to hearing it, so they can build muscle memory. But it's okay if they miss some shots here and there, as long as they're working on having great form. So that's shooting. You also could work on ball handling. You also could work on footwork, which would include jump stops, pivoting, low post moves. You also could work on rebounding. You could work on cutting, like backdoor, so players know that they don't just stand there and call for the ball nonstop. So there's a number of areas you can work on. We talked about shooting. There's a number of areas you can work on in this 10-minute segment to make sure that they're getting skill work. Skill work meaning individual work so they get in the game and all the links are stronger. I don't want to say that skill work is the most important component, but it might be because at the youth levels, you want to develop them for the future because unskilled basketball players are really just athletes. They're just football players. You want them to be able to shoot. You want them to be able to dribble. You want them to be able to move around and make decisions, being skilled enough with their hands and feet and the coordination involved to make the correct pass, to be able to jump stop, to be able to play within the structure of the game of basketball and not just be an athlete that's running around being big and strong. Sadly, even high school coaches forget this step sometimes. And I think they start in the summer and they're always like, we got to work on skill work more. We're going to work our guys. We're going to work on more shooting. We're going to work on more ball handling. But then the season starts and you're being judged on wins and losses. And it's easy sometimes for high school coaches to forget to focus on the skill work. So they just go straight to team stuff. And next thing you know, 2 hours of practice are done. So you have to work on skill stuff at every level because otherwise players aren't going to be as skilled as they could be. And that's mental and physical because through skill work, you're learning the timing of when to pass, how to use both hands. You're learning the timing of how pieces fit together, which is building basketball IQ. Next, you want to work on defense. I would suggest working on defense for 20 minutes. Again, we have 90 minutes to work with. I would dedicate 20 minutes just to defense. I would basically divide this in half to work on 10 minutes of individual defense and 10 minutes of team defense. You can change that a little bit either way. You can dedicate all 20 minutes of that to team defense if you want, but there's some simple drills that are very efficient and give you a lot of value that make a lot of sense for teams of every level. So for individual defense, I would suggest the simple zigzag drill. You have a line of players in the corner on the baseline, partner them up, one ball for two players. They're going to zigzag back and forth. One player's playing defense, one player's playing offense, zigzag back and forth to half court, then have them check up with a bounce pass. Otherwise, they just kind of shove it in each other's chest and throw it too hard. So bounce pass there, bounce pass back, and then they play one-on-one. Once they shoot, you can have some rules about how many shots are allowed. Can you get an offensive rebound, which is good sometimes to force them to box out. But you don't want it to be unlimited. Otherwise, the taller player just kind of shoots, misses, shoots, misses, shoots, misses, and it holds up the whole team. So once somebody scores or gets stopped, they go to the opposite corner, they wait in line, and then they switch roles. So whoever started on defense is now on offense and vice versa. Then they're going to go down the opposite way. It's a simple drill. It's a great drill. You can get a lot out of it. You can tweak it ever so slightly to make it live from the jump. You can say, okay, we just want you to dribble back and forth. You can tell the ball handler, you're only allowed to go behind your back. You're only allowed to go through your legs because sometimes crossing over in front of a defender that's really close it's a little bit risky and dangerous. So there's ways that you can tweak it to fit exactly what you want. For team defense, hopefully you know the shell drill. If not, make sure you do some research on shell. Shell is 4-on-4. There's a player in each corner. There's a player at each slot, which is a little bit higher up from the wing, both sides. So there's 4 players on offense against 4 players on defense. I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but some of it comes down to how do you want to play help side? So once the ball is swung, are you going to be jumping into the gap? Are you going to try to deny one pass away? Some of that is a philosophical choice that you're going to have to make for your team. But once you decide that, and once you're working on shell, you want them to talk, you want them to bend their knees, you want them to be active. And then you should work on some simple areas. Swing the ball, make sure they're jumping to the ball, make sure they're communicating. Then you want to add cuts. What happens? Do you bump them? Where do you send them? Then you want to work on handoffs. Then you want to work on baseline attacks, and you can build from there. But it should be very simple, and you should go in phases as you're teaching. So that was 20 minutes of defense. Next, I would suggest working on some type of passing drill. 10 minutes. There needs to be movement. Do you want them passing with either hand? Are you okay with that? Or do you want them only throwing 2-hand chest passes, 2-hand bounce passes, 2-hand overhead passes? They need all of the above, in my opinion. And you see that with European kids where they're working with their weaker hand a lot. And what happens, they get in the game and they feel very comfortable. It's second nature. Muscle memory's kind of kicked in. They're good at it. And they stand out for being really skilled. They're appreciated. People recognize it. So you got to decide how much time you want to put into that because there's going to be some mistakes along the way. They're going to have some bad passes as they're learning to use their weaker hand. So figure out which passes you want to work on. There's some great drills where the entire team's involved with moving, relocating. There's also some simple drills where you can just line up across from your partner and just for 1 minute throw chest passes back and forth, 1 minute bounce passes back and forth, 1 minute overhead. But I would encourage you to also at some point in time implement the pass fake. So they learn how to use their eyes, look somewhere else, fake it high, throw it low, and vice versa. Implement the pass fake into the passing drills once you get going. So 10 minutes of passing. Now I would go into 5-on-0. 5-on-0 is sometimes boring. I've been a player. sometimes boring, but it's very necessary. Not all humans learn the same way. Some need to be told something several times. Some need to see it. Some need to do it. Everybody learns differently. So 5-0, you want to give them words. You want to explain it. You want to teach it. You want to show them. But then they need to do it. And if you're going to be the type of coach that has one player that's always the point guard and one player that's always the center and one player that's always, if they're always stuck in those positions, it will be easier for you to teach because they know to run to that spot. But what's best for them would be if they understood how to be every position. So maybe your tallest player is not going to be your point guard. Maybe the point guard won't be your center. But the 2 and the 3 and the 4, sometimes in youth basketball, there's not a huge difference between any of those. It kind of distinguishes one from another. So make sure that sometimes the 2 and the 3 know how to start the play and bring the ball down. Make sure that the 4 knows how to set the screen and then come to the top. Make sure they understand the plays inside and out. But how many plays do they really need? Do you want to focus more on actions? Because you're going to need those blobs and slobs that we talked about, right? But how many plays do you want them calling out? How many plays do you want to have to hope that they can remember in a game to ensure they have a little bit of structure while knowing that they might forget some of them? So I would suggest you have some type of motion offense, something simple, something easy. As you move up in ages, as you move up in levels, you might want to include a horn set, some type of action where there's 2 bigger players high and a player in each corner where the guard can either come off a pick and roll, come off a pick and pop. You want to maybe consider incorporating that once the players kind of differentiate themselves position-wise. Do you want to have a dribble drive? Do you want to play with a flex? Do you want to play out of a Princeton? Do you want to have an Iverson set, a diamond, a floppy, a stagger, old-fashioned block-to-block screens for low post entries? There's tons of options. But I would suggest that you do not overdo it. I would suggest that you have 1, maximum 2 systems, sets, actions, whatever you want to call them, for players to work on so they know what to do when you call this play out. But this takes practice. So it's hard in the beginning, and over time, it'll become easier and easier as they get going and they know what they should be doing. So I would start half court and work on it, teach it, have them do it, sub in the other players, let them do it, mix and match the teams, then have them go down, do it 5-0, and then come back 5-0, then have the next group jump on. So you have to do it, you have to rep it, you have to build muscle memory with that. And now to probably the most fun part for the team, scrimmage. You should scrimmage a certain portion of every practice. So as a rough draft, you might want to say up to a third of every practice you want to scrimmage. Basically, you want them to play. And if you think about basketball, it's a game, and games are fun. It's fun to play games. So we know that kids don't play enough. They don't. They just don't go to the park. They don't go to the playground. There's not groups of kids at the park anymore. There isn't. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But if we know that that's a fact, we have to make sure that we find ways for them to utilize practice and get enough playing reps inside of those practices. So think about that word play. It's fun. You play a game. It's fun. You associate that with being a kid and playing with your toys. Kids need to play the game to be fun. It just can't be drills. It can't be drills over and over and over. They need to play. So we're going to let them scrimmage. I would suggest you let them scrimmage for at least 20 minutes and try to do the best you can to stop it as needed, but not too much. And everybody's going to have their own feel with that. It's going to be your own touch and your own experience that you're going to gain over time. You don't want to stop it every single time because that will feel like, it will just feel unnatural to them. They'll feel like, man, there's 20 referees on the court. Every once in a while, they're going to make a mistake. Every once in a while, they're going to travel. So be a ref, call the blatant travels, call the fouls, but for the most part, do the best you can to let them play. Let them learn by doing. You don't want them to be running a play. Say you had a play called Utah, and they come down, they call out Utah, and somebody's in the wrong position. You don't want to say stop, and you yell at Tommy or Sally, and you yell at them for being in the wrong spot. Let them figure it out and let them correct themselves. If they can learn how to self-correct, it will help them learn how to self-correct in an actual game because you only have a certain number of timeouts and you're not going to be able to stop them every single time that you want to in a game. So let them play. Let them learn by doing. Be positive as possible, and encourage, celebrate good decisions, and celebrate those unselfish actions where somebody's willing to make an extra pass or tries really hard to use their weaker hand. Celebrate those things, even if they make a mistake, even if they miss the shot. If they're making good choices and good decisions, celebrate them. So this was roughly 80 minutes of work. That leaves 10 minutes outside of that from our 90-minute practice slot. where you might be coming in right after another team and there might be another team coming in right after you. So you don't have a lot of time to play with. So you have 80 minutes of work, which leaves 10 minutes for water breaks and the huddles before and after practice. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please share it with others. We want to help coaches be better at their craft. We want to make better players. To make better players, we all need to be better coaches. Ideally, we'll have an impact where we all collectively can help players stick with this beautiful sport for years and years to come. I wanted to make this sample practice plan as simple as possible. I wanted it to be basic so it can be adapted to you and your specific needs. Obviously, there's a great deal of changes that can be made with the overall structure, but that depends on your team's needs. Comment below with your biggest problem area, tactical wise, right? So X's and O's. What's the biggest issue you have? Maybe you need to know more drills to work on skills. Maybe you want to know more about shell defense and all the options. Maybe you want to know more about how to put in a play. Whatever that problem area is, send us a quick message via our website. Use the contact us page. We'll send you a sample Word doc practice plan that can be tweaked, edited, and adapted to the needs of your team. We want to help you. Again, thank you to all the coaches for dedicating your time, doing everything you can to make an amazing learning environment for your team. It's okay if you don't know everything. Nobody does. Back to that record-leading championship-winning coach, Phil Jackson. He doesn't know everything. But if we all work collectively together to grow the game, to share knowledge, then we'll be doing a great service to all the kids that we can impact. So do your best to remind yourself that it's okay to lose a couple games along the way. The world's not going to end if and when your kids make a mistake. It's okay. Don't lose too much sleep over the wins and the losses. Just push kids to improve. And most importantly, to fall in love with the process. If you do that, you're a great coach and you're having a huge impact. Even if the haters in the stands, even if those haters don't always see it that way. Thanks for listening. And please subscribe if you haven't already done so. And we'll keep sharing knowledge. Come get some.